Welcome to the Monday Minute of the Hunt Backcountry podcast. These are shorter and more informal episodes where we answer listener questions. Steve, we're back to normal, not in a hotel room as we were for last week's Monday Minute.
Yeah. Yeah, feels good to be back home, back with the family, get back into the kind of regular, working routine. Obviously, we got, what are we, 2-ish weeks out
Two
from the Hunt
weeks.
Expo in Salt Lake, which looking forward to. I
Yeah,
randomly decided to rebuild our booth for that middle of last week, so we're kind of working on that at the moment. But yeah, things are good.
it is good. We've definitely been getting questions from folks on if we're going to be there and what we're going to have there and et cetera, which is great. We're excited to see a lot of you. Just a quick rundown on that. I think we mentioned this prior, but just to clarify some things. We'll, of course, be at Hunt Expo with a full booth. We will have all packs there to see, all different bag sizes to check out, and then all different combinations of sizing with things loaded up with weight. So, no matter what you're interested in, you can see it slash try it on there. We will not have physical inventory to purchase and walk away with that day, just because logistically that gets really complex. But we'll be taking orders, show special pricing and shipping for free. And then those will be shipping like super quick. Some people get shipping notifications within hours, or if it's later in the show, it might take, several days to get caught up. But that's what that looks like for Hunt Expo. And then again, because those dates interfere with Portland, we're not going to be at Portland this year, but we will have a display pack and a couple places where you can go check out that display pack and sign up for a show special pricing for folks who attend Portland. So stay tuned for more on that. But Steve, to dive into it, SHOT Show felt like it was back to like a post-COVID normal in many ways. It felt like there was 100,000 people there. There wasn't, but there probably was 50 plus thousand people there. Just a massive event with a ton of people.
Yeah, frankly, it was just fantastic. The We've been doing this for quite a while now, so we have a lot of friends in the hunting world and then tactical world as well, which is SHOT Show's kind of morphed into. And it was just a blast for you and I to walk around the floor and felt like every 50 steps you're running into a familiar face and stop and have a conversation. And that was really cool.
It was hard for us to see stuff. Like, I know people, like, I've personally talked with guys. I'm like, oh, you went to SHOT. What's the coolest stuff you saw? And as
Oh
you
yeah.
said, Steve, we were there for meeting with some of our suppliers and partners. We had some meetings kind of like on the military sales side of things. We had some commitments and things that kept us busy. So we didn't get as much time as we'd liked just to like walk and wander and stumble into stuff. We're gonna have to do more time in the future years. But anything that does stand out, because we did see some cool stuff. I would have to go through some notes and business cards to remember all of it.
Uh, Gosh, you caught me off guard there. Yeah. Let's see. What did we see? There was definitely some cool stuff. Um, one of the random ones was the Hornady's got that little red flashing light, right? That just senses
Oh yeah,
vibration.
the
That was
target
cool. For like
indicator.
$10, it's a target indicator. So it's like $10, it's this little thing that I don't even know if it clamps on or sticks on or whatever, but you can put it on your target. And if you're shooting at 1,000 yards or whatever, if you hit the target and it just any type of vibration, that red light just flashes for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And that was really simple and really cool. Because there's certainly times I was telling a story when I was shooting one day. I was out by myself out in the desert south of Boise shooting, and it's like 600 yards, and I shot, and the way the wind was blowing, I just never heard anything, right? Oh crap, I missed. Shot two more times, missed, and I had actually put cardboard up behind the um, steel target so I could see, if I just missed by an inch or did I miss by a foot, and I would go up there, and all three bullets were like perfect freaking shots, and the way the heat waves are out there. I couldn't even see the little impact on the steel, but got out there and yeah, all the shots were freaking dialed. And would have been really nice to have that indicator of, oh, I am hitting the target. Yeah, that was just a random, simple, cool product.
Yeah, I think it really stood out too because we had previously seen a similar concept, but a much more complicated execution
Right.
of like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, here's this sensor you put on a target, and then here's this receiver that you take with you as the shooter, and it has, up to a mile range and these bigger units and complexity, and they talk to each other, and it was a cool system. But then we walked over to Hornady, and they're like, yeah, here's these $10 vibration sensors, and you can, it comes with its own little mount, like this rubber strap, and like you could strap it to the stand of your target, and you hit that target, and it vibrates, and boom, this giant, or not giant, this small but very bright light flashes, and it has great long distance visibility, and you just see, yep, I hit. So it doesn't show you where, of course, but it's a cool little indicator for $10. So sometimes a simple solution is great.
Yeah. Simple is always better.
One thing that came up, as I mentioned, we some of the meetings we had were like on the military side of things, Steve, and
Hmm.
one thing that came up there is relates to our regular customers, and then there's I don't want to call it misconceptions out there, but this whole idea of made in the USA, and there's been chatter previously that what does that mean? Is it true? To what extent is it true, etc. And there's some folks will understand this when I say it, some won't, but there's something called Berry compliance, which for the military, in most instances, not all, they are purchasing products that are fully Berry compliant, which essentially means they are not only made in the USA, but all of the materials and components, in our case, like things like fabric and buckles and etc. of a pack, are sourced and made in the USA. It's relevant. It was like in our head coming off of SHOT Show and some military stuff that we do, but also just thought it would be cool to elaborate a little bit about that for even our regular customers who maybe never heard of Berry compliance, don't even know, but just to like dive deeper a little bit past, okay, XO, we make our packs, we make our pack accessories in the USA, but what about materials? What about components? What about fabrics, etc.? So wanted to dive into that a little bit, Steve, and what can you say about all that?
Yeah. I mean, we pretty much buy and source Berry compliant USA made materials essentially wherever we can until we hit a speed bump where something doesn't, you can't get it available here in the US. So when like you just kind of go through like all of our Cordura 500D Cordura, USA made, Berry compliant. The exception there is Fusion, First Light. We buy that fabric from them. They forever had it made in the USA, and then 2 years ago switched overseas with that. Um, and where I guess yeah, as I'm mentioning that, just a heads up, we are going to phase out Fusion throughout this year, so that will no longer be an option after probably this fall. We'll kind of keep it stocked through the summer and phase it out this fall. Um, but yeah, just going through the pack. Cordura is all the webbing is Berry compliant, made in the USA. The all the main plastic buckles on the pack are Berry compliant, made in the USA. We actually use kind of a combination of all different vendors just because it'd be simpler to use just one. So like National Molding, huge buckle company, make Berry compliant stuff. You could say, all right, we're just using National Molding to be limited to their options, but sometimes they don't have the exact buckle that I'm looking for. So like, an example would be the 2-inch ladder lock that we use for the hip belt. That comes from a company called ITW Nexus. Again, made in the USA, Berry compliant. The said all the 1-inch main buckles. Last with K4, we changed that to YKK, this is their military made in the USA, Berry compliant buckle. That we switched to that because I really, really liked the locking buckle that they developed. And it's kind of that buckle's a nice combination of like still relatively lightweight, but it is like a military, buckle that it's really stout and strong. So, National Molding has like two different series. One's called Mojave and one's called Mojave HD. The HD one's like really, really beefy, but like too much so. Like when you click that thing together, it has a very audible like snap. Like, if you're out hunting, you're trying to be quiet, it like echo across the canyon type thing. And the regular Mojave's kind of light and flimsy. Where this YKK one's really good compromise between those two. All the carbon stays that make up the frame, those are made in New Mexico, 100% made in the USA, very compliant. Um, Really, it's like you kind of go down the list, even the plastic that we use and the hip belt that kind of reinforces behind the lumbar pad, made in the USA, very compliant. All the stretch fabric made in the USA, very compliant. The foam is made in the USA. We actually buy it through a Canadian distributor, which is a little tricky. So it's made in the USA, shipped up to Canada. They laminate like on our harness. We laminate two foams together to create a really custom, nice, cushy feel there. Best of both worlds, where you get a more dense foam that is going to hold up and last a long time. And we laminate like a quarter inch of really soft foam to the front of that. So it is that one's brought up there, laminated, and then shipped back down to us. Um, what else? Basically, essentially, when we get into what's not made in the USA, the YKK zipper that we use is called their RC, stands for racket coil. It That zipper was designed for like airline luggage. It's got a special shape to the metal coil where the threads that stitch the coil to the zipper tape there's actually kind of a recess in the metal coil so that they're not exposed and getting abrasion and rubbed on. Over time, that would be a failure point of a metal zipper. That's just flat out not made in the USA. It's not an option. It's tricky. Like when we do like a military order, like it sucks that we have to go buy a standard YKK military zipper that's very compliant because it's an inferior product. Like just flat out it's going to fail at some point, where the racket coil is going to be probably last, two or three times longer. But that's just what it is. That's what they need. But for our hunting packs, we choose to go get that RC zipper. And then with K4, it's actually kind of a cool process, and YKK jumped through some hoops for us. But that zipper is manufactured over there, but the tape is just left kind of natural color, so it's kind of a whitish. And they actually ship it to YKK in Georgia to do all the finishing. So the tape as well as the sliders, the metal slider, are actually finished in Georgia, their plant there, where they paint the sliders and dye the tape to get the exact coyote brown and ranger green that we want. Um, and then the only other part, so that metal tri-glide that's at the top of the load lifters, we get that from a company called A Plus, and they have that made overseas. I tried to find like a good way to get that done in the States, just aesthetically and cost wise. It was just a better product to get that from those guys. That's what they do. They do molding metal products and custom molded products. And so when we do the Berry compliant military packs, the company that makes all of our G hooks here, and they're actually locally in Boise, we switch over to them and get those made there. But they don't look as nice. They're going to kind of rough around the edges. But yeah, in general, like I said, the for us, um, it's so much easier to stick with USA companies, like as far as sourcing and things like that, and getting things in a timely manner, that I try to avoid going overseas pretty much at all costs. Like when we do, like those metal tri-glides, we order an entire year's worth at once because it's a freaking headache, the long lead times, and especially the last handful of years, freight coming from overseas has been a freaking mess. Um, and then the zippers, same thing with YKK. We order those in kind of 6 to 8 month chunks, where we just have a huge shipment of zippers show up and good to go for 8 months, and we kind of repeat that. So we only order like twice a year ish. But that's pretty much it. Like I think our language on the website is like we specifically say like, hey, we source and buy USA material wherever we can, but we've never really did like a deep dive into each individual part. But I would say as a whole, 95% of all the components in the pack is made in the US, very compliant. Um, I said it's something that we prefer to do. It's frankly easier. Um, and then even in the case of zipper, it's actually more expensive for us to go get that YKK RC zipper and bring it in than it is to buy the US version, but it's just a better product, and we're certainly willing to do that.
Yeah. I think the YKK example is a good one because it kind of highlights the, I don't say like gray area of made in USA, but just how it's not always as cut and clean as possible. Like you take
Yeah,
YKK, they're a Japanese company. They have a US presence. They build some of their product line in the US. They build certain things in their product line that you can only get overseas. For a product like ours, they build a portion of it overseas and then finish it in the US. Like it's just not as like black and white. And as you said, Steve, it's like, okay, there are YKK zippers that we could have 100% sourced in the US, but if it's not the best product, period, and we're still buying from the same company, and that same company has a better product that involves some overseas manufacturing, like, do we go with the better product or not? Right. And
yeah,
hopefully, like, and we've obviously had that conversation with YKK, like, we'd love to have the best product from YKK, which YKK, if you're not aware, is known for building the best zippers across really almost any spectrum. Please build this one in the USA, right? But we can't force their hand to do that, you know?
yeah. So I'm all about USA until it comes to the point where I have to use an inferior product to do so, and then at that case, I'll go look wherever I got to go look to find it. Fortunately for us, like if you were like high end, super high end tents and stuff like that. Those material, like the mills that are actually making, finishing, like
Yeah,
super high quality tent fabric. Oof, like good luck trying to get that in the US. Like there's some things that exist, but it's not going to be to the same quality. Like we just don't have that technology, um, as near as available as, it's what they're doing overseas.
yeah,
But
yeah,
fortunately for us, being like, we share a lot with the military world. Like if the military world didn't exist, um, in the US, right, all this manufacturing, it'd be really hard for us to probably get this stuff. Like yeah,
100%.
we're not like a Hilleberg, right? Like a Hilleberg fabric. To my knowledge, I've asked around, like you can't get that type of fabric in the United States, right? Or super techy, yeah, just like I was thinking like backpacks, like REI style backpacks, like some of the things that they're using just not available. But because 500D is so common, and webbing and buckles and stuff like that, because like I said, I don't if the military market didn't exist, I don't think that stuff would exist here in the US anymore.
Yeah, fully agree. Cool. One follow-up that came out of our previous Monday minutes, again, that was after Sheep Show. We were recording, we were doing listener Q&A, very casual in the hotel room, and we made a comment about like the ridiculous kind of cost of sheep tags and things like that from Sheep Show.
Hmm.
Um, and it was, I guess, questioned to us like, hey, are you guys aware that those dollars are like fundraisers essentially for conservation? So I just want to
Hmm.
clarify there, like we are not saying that someone shouldn't like spend a lot of money or that a lot of that money doesn't go to a good cause. I think where we're coming from, Steve, is not it's not all pure in the sense that the reason a tag goes for say $400,000 one year or $600,000 the next year isn't because someone wants to give $200,000 more to conservation. It's
They could care
because
less.
they've found a ram that's pre-scouted and that's bigger, and they're putting a pure dollar amount on this trophy that is essentially guaranteed, and they're buying it, right? So,
Yeah.
I like there's a lot of good that comes out of these high dollar tags, and a lot of money goes to conservation. I'm all for that. It's just also a little bit crazy that a lot of those dollars can change pretty dramatically simply because like, oh, there's a bigger one this year, let's pay for the bigger one. So that's the part that I think we were addressing. Again, not
Yeah.
saying that there's not good that comes out of those dollars.
Yeah, we'll have to do some research on where those funds go. I'd love to know. Um, yeah, is it? I'm assuming just to sheep, or is it conservation across the board?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone. I do know that a lot of it does stay towards sheep, right? Like that's
Yeah,
at least that's the point of it, meant to be the point of it. But again, you
right.
get into each of these states' tags. You have different agencies involved. I'm sure there's different protocols, administrative fees, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't want to also paint with a broad brush and say that,
Maybe it's
Montana and Colorado and this, like they're all used the same way.
sure. Maybe it's some like let's get someone from Sheep Foundation on the podcast and just chat through that. I'd love to know that and understand that better.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, that was a good follow up and a good point. Again, we're not trying to poo poo on raising money for conservation, just highlighting that some of it still is silly based on inches. A cool follow up from a listener. So we had talked at one point in December. Um, I don't remember the exact context, but I brought up the Flextail Zero, which is a really small air mattress pump, and how I've historically not used their previous products, but they had this new one coming that looked good and had great specs, etc. I did get one and have done very brief testing, but hadn't talked about it yet because I've only done very brief testing. But this listener actually reached out and has done a lot more testing. So I thought it'd be really cool. Shout out to Damon Jacobs who did this testing and kind of shared some results. So I'm sharing it with you guys. So he got that same Flextail Zero. I'll leave a link to it in the show description if you guys are unaware of what I'm talking about. But new small battery powered pump. It weighs with the pump itself, a battery, and one. They have different basically adapters based on the type of valve you have for your air pad. So the pump, the battery, and the adapter valve weighed in right at 2.1 ounces. And then Damon also said he was previously carrying the storage slash inflation bag that came with his Xtherm, and that weighed 1.6. So essentially, he's a half ounce more than he was by carrying that previous bag. And then he did some cool testing. So he did a full charge on the battery, and on one full battery, it inflated his pad 14 times and deflated it, which we talked about this. It can deflate your pad, meaning it's going to pull extra air out and get it as small as possible, almost 14 times. He said it died on like the 14th deflate. So essentially, like 14 inflations and deflations on a single charge. He said it took roughly 80 seconds to inflate the pad each time and about 60 seconds to deflate it. And obviously, if you only used the pump to inflate the pad, not deflate it, you should be able to get 25 plus fills out of it. And again, that's a single charge. So if you think about a 10-day hunt, how many guys are doing longer than a 10-day hunt? You're inflating, deflating every single day on a single charge easily, which is pretty cool. So, again, thanks to Damon for doing some of that testing. I'm going to continue to do some testing with mine and use it in the field, but I thought it was cool to see those results on that. And again, there'll be a link in the show description if you guys want to check out that pump. Steve's like, it's still 2 ounces and I have air in my lungs.
I was just keeping my mouth shut. I
Uh,
wanted to just be like, just be a freaking man, and it takes me 15 breaths to blow up my pad. Like, and it's something I don't have to like charge and work. You know what I mean? Like, there's a cost to
yeah, for
like
sure.
having to manage all that crap. It's one more item that, is that charged up? I got to plug in the night before and deal with. And
Yeah,
I get it. Like when I do a float trip with my brother and Jack that actually works out in our warehouse. We do this steelhead float trip almost every year for the last 15 years, and I've got a pump that I already have because of the blowing up my raft, and I made a little adapter to blow up my pad, and it's freaking awesome. I just clip it in, keep doing camp chores, and all of a sudden I come check on it, and it's good to go. Like it's
yeah.
super handy. But when it comes like a backpacking hunt, for me, it's like, yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm sure it's super cool and appealing. It just um, it's like, yeah, if you can't blow up your pad, you probably got some other issues. You shouldn't be out there.
I'm gonna tell you that if I pack that on our next hunt, you want to borrow it. Like,
That's gonna be
hey
one of those
man,
deals where
you
like,
got some
hey,
issues.
how's that pump going over there? Let me borrow that sucker.
Dude, well, that's what was so nice is
But,
Mark had packed one on the sheep hunt, and of course I was like, "Well, you've packed it. I'll use it if you're offering." And
yeah,
it was so
right.
freaking nice.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
I know it'd be super nice. Like it is annoying. You're tired at the end of the day. depending on
Yeah.
the elevation you're at, you get pretty lightheaded after you do it, or if you try to do it real fast. But I just started counting breaths. It just makes it easier for me, you know? And I know it's like 15 breaths, like good full breaths. And then that Thermarest NXT pad I got this year, it's like right at the perfect level, you know, minimal adjustment
Hmm.
after that. And it just makes it seems to make it easier because you're not like, just feel like you, oh God, I've been doing this for 5 minutes. It's like, no, it was 15 breaths. Like, I'm okay.
This.
I got this. I could do
All right.
this.
Uh, let's hit one listener question. This guy's gearing up for Spring Bear, which just flat out got me excited to think of, okay, winter will make it through, Spring Bear is coming. But he said they're coming to Idaho for a spring bear hunt, him and his dad. He said they don't have any high quality rain gear. And he was wondering about, he said they do have lightweight packable rain jackets, just no high quality rain gear. So I'm assuming they probably have something like, I don't know, frog togs or a marmot jacket, like something budget, probably not quote unquote
Hmm.
hunting rain gear, is how I read this question. And he was basically saying, like, hey, can we get away with our lightweight, assuming non-hunting rain jackets and a tarp, or should we invest money not into a tarp, but into better rain gear? And they're trying to keep everything budget friendly. So he said he was looking at $100 tarp from Bora Gear. Seems like something they could both share and use for spring bear hunting if they needed additional protection to get out of the rain. Of course, in addition to their lightweight, I'm assuming cheap non-hunting rain gear. So he was just wondering thoughts, pros, and cons on that. So I'll take a stab first, and then Steve, you can weigh in. You're not prepared for this question, so I'll let you think about it. When I think of really quality rain gear versus a tarp, the first thing that comes into mind is obviously mobility, right? So if you're using a tarp as a shelter for precipitation, that just means you're sheltering in place, right? So you're gonna be under that tarp, under that shelter. You're losing mobility if you want the coverage of that tarp. Seems very basic, makes a lot of sense, but just something to keep in mind. If you're out in the rain or it's raining for days and you need to be mobile, well, of course, that tarp's not gonna do very much for you because you're gonna have to move at some point. For spring bear, you tend, depending on the time of year you're going, you're probably going to tend to do a lot of sitting and glassing anyway. So you don't necessarily always have to be mobile. Obviously, you're packing in, packing out, chasing a bear. There's times where you're mobile, but there's a ton of time you're sitting and glassing. So I do think that a tarp for spring bear specifically can be really helpful. Going back to some of the spring bear hunts, like the year we had that group hunt, Steve, with Exo guys, I hunted with Ryan Bayless and somebody else one day. I think Joey Pyburn. And it was a rainy, nasty day, and we had a tarp, and it was awesome sitting and glassing under a tarp for several hours while it rained. So it's a great approach, I think, for spring bear. Just obviously understand the limitations to it. And yeah, I mean, you can get rains in the spring for sure. You can have wet days, but I just wouldn't be overly concerned with it. And long story short, I would say, yeah, I think I would rather invest in $100 in a tarp you guys can share rather than go drop, you know, 400 bucks a person on quote unquote good hunting rain gear for sure. And then I will just say with a tarp, he mentioned the Abora Gear tarp. They make different models, but with a tarp, always practice. When you have a tarp that is versatile, that's great. Like you can set up in a bunch of different configurations, but the versatility comes at a cost of, well, shoot, I can set this up in a bunch of ways, but how do I actually set it up? So just practice with it, understand how to set it up in different configurations with poles, with not, an A-frame or a lean-to. There's so many different ways to set up tarps and then just keep elevation in mind as well. So that'd be my quick thought is, yeah, if you want additional protection to your lightweight rain gear, a small packable tarp is a pretty good choice for sure. Anything
My
else,
head
Steve?
immediately went to, are they backpacking?
Yeah, he didn't clarify.
And clarify that. If you're not, if you're backpacking, you can start like maybe you need to take rain gear. If you're not backpacking, completely like moot point. Don't even bother with it, right? Like if it rains so hard that you're miserable and you gotta like hike back out and go to your truck and hang out at camp until things dry out, like you're gonna have extra clothes there and then hang your stuff up in the tent and let it dry out or whatever. Like just do that. If you are backpacking, it's like even Idaho in the spring, sure, we get some like a typical, you're generally going to have pretty nice weather. You could, like there's that one year we went, Mark. The forecast looked like December, right? Like it was
It
supposed to be
did.
like 14 degrees and snowing and a high of 30 and ended up not being nearly as bad as that the forecast calls, if I remember right. But generally, you're going to have like very sunny, warm afternoons, and then it's very common to get kind of these thunderstorms that roll through that last 15 minutes to an hour, right? And that like in those kind of situations, if the temps are somewhat warm at all, I'll just get like if I'm that'd be a when did we? Oh, it was during when we were down at SHOT Show. We did that question like synthetic versus wool, right? For a
Hmm.
base layer, that'd be an example where I'd go for wool. Like if I know there's a chance of precipitation, because wool, like if it's warm enough and I just wear my thin base layer of wool, like I can get pretty wet and I'll just stay fairly warm and comfortable, especially if I'm moving at all. And then the sun comes out 30 minutes later and it all dries out and life's good again, right? That'd be the approach I would take if I was backpacking. Would be like, I mean, maybe just pack that lightweight kind of cheap rain gear these already got jacket, and then the reality is you're probably not going to use it. Like just in my experience over the last 20 years, anything in the, the exception of Alaska and like Oregon coast, like rain gear is just not that big of a deal. It's so rare that the weather is so freaking terrible that you need that you're out hunting in it all day long, and especially bear hunting. The bears, um, you definitely if it's raining and the sun's gonna come out, you want to be like sitting and glassing a really good green hillside for
Hmm.
when that rain stops, in which case that tarp would be absolutely ideal. That's exactly how we saw your bear last year. Remember that? We were
Yeah,
up on
I was
that
thinking
spine
about that.
ridge. We didn't have, I mean, we actually had all of our backpacking stuff with us, but we just found a really good kind of thick pine tree and sat underneath it. And then we were glassing that hillside and it's raining, 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 and then stopped and bam, there's a bear. We went and shot it. So, definitely a little pro tip 6008 for you. Be prepared for when the rain stops.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, rain gear is it's just not that important compared to if I lived and hunted in Alaska or again, Oregon coast, places where it rains a lot and you do have to deal with the weather. Because just here in Idaho, you know, yeah, if it's like 4 days of just downpour rain, A, the hunting's gonna be miserable, B, you're gonna be miserable. Like you're not gonna go hunt in that. Just go back to camp and wait for that to pass.
Well, yeah, guys, thanks for the questions. We back to normal for a couple weeks here now that we're not traveling, so we would love to answer your listener questions. So just as always, send those to podcast@exomindgear.com. And if you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, just hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app to do that. We'll talk to you soon.